CEO and founder of Golden Amber Business in Muscat and co-founder of the Namah Studio, Ms. Chhavi Sharma.
Now that I come to think of it, I do feel that duality is my greatest asset.
Most leaders would have given me one identity or stuck with it. The fact that you actually feel both versions of yourself is really rare.
What I've learned is that you can't govern a business effectively if you only understand it from the top down. You have to know what it feels like to build it from the ground up too.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to FaceTime with Leaders, powered by Directors Institute, World Council of Directors. I'm your host, Sunny Pancholi, and today's guest has spent over 2 decades on the inside of two very different worlds: the prestige beauty business of the Gulf and the fast-changing world of sustainable consumer brands in India. She has built distribution for names like Dior and Clarins out of Muscat, to Clarins to number one in its segment in Oman, and then went and co-founded a sustainable yoga wear brand back in India. She is also now an IICA Certified Independent Director with a real point of view on brand, consumer governance, and ESG. Joining us today is Ms. Chhavi Sharma, CEO and founder of Golden Amber Business in Muscat and co-founder of the Namah Studio. Ms. Chhavi, welcome to the show. Really, really glad to have you with us today.
Sunny, thank you so much for the warm welcome. And thank you to the Directors Institute and the World Council of Directors for including me today on FaceTime with Leaders. You framed it perfectly, Sunny. My career has been defined by bridging distinct worlds. Managing global luxury giants like Dior and Clarins, amongst others in the GCC, actually taught me a lot. The absolute value of operational excellence, market precision, and brand equity. On the other hand, building a sustainable brand from the ground up in India deeply grounded me in the realities of agile supply chain and authentic ESG practices. So while these markets require very different execution on the ground, they demand the exact same foundation at the top: robust corporate governance, risk resilience, and long-term strategic stewardship. As an IICA Certified Independent Director, I'm so excited today to discuss how we can bring this blend of operational grit and board-level oversight to help modern businesses thrive sustainably. Sunny, thank you, and I'm delighted to be here.
All right, so what are we waiting for? Let's dive right in. Ms. Chhavi, you have built businesses in Muscat and you have built a brand in India. Two very different consumers, two very different ways of doing things. When you wake up in the morning and think about your day, which version of you is doing the thinking?
Yeah, honestly, I think I wake up as a translator. I don't think there's a clean split between the Muscat operator and the Indian co-founder. They have somewhere merged into, like a dual processing system. But if I had to be precise, the Indian co-founder usually wakes up first simply because of the geographical placement. Of course, fueled by resilience. But within the hour, the Muscat operator takes over to provide the structural discipline and high-end luxury standard as with a strategic lens. See, I found that my first actions in the morning, spanning between the two worlds, range from WhatsApp group chats on design, production, fabrics, stock, agility bottlenecks, to reviewing the cosmetic universe, whether it's retail or distribution, or again stock, brand building in the GCC and specifically Oman. But without question, Muscat and India have two very different textures in business environment. Reflecting on that, India demands a resourcefulness and resilience, something, if I may say, comfort within chaos, and a really quick response time, and sometimes even a quick pivot. Wearing this hat is actually leading with an entrepreneurial mindset of creativity and connection. Whereas, in contrast, Muscat demands a high level of operational excellence and diplomacy, a deep understanding of the Arab, Oman, and multicultural, international culture. I found that wearing this hat is leading with an executive mindset with a focus on sustainable growth. Now that I come to think of it, I do feel that duality is my greatest set. I don't just see the high level strategy, I also understand the operational friction required executed. What I've learned is that you can't govern a business effectively if you only understand it from the top down. You have to know what it feels like to build it from the ground up too.
Ms. Chhavi, you know what I love about that answer? Most leaders would have given me one identity or stuck with it. The fact that you actually feel both versions of yourself is really rare. So tell me, Ms. Chhavi, you have founded a sustainable yoga wear brand. So you have lived this from the inside. Now, in fashion and beauty today, how does one actually distinguish between a genuine ESG commitment and plain greenwashing?
True. This is really a critical question for any board today. Having built a sustainable brand, I've seen that greenwashing, it's often a communication failure, while genuine ESG is an operational reality. Now, to distinguish between the two, I would look for three specific indicators that sit on the board's desk. I'm going to start with something that's really close to my heart: traceability of the supply chain. See, genuine commitment isn't just about using, like organic cotton. It's about being able to map, let's say, your tier one, tier two, and tier three suppliers. If a company can't provide a transparent audit trail of where their raw materials come from and who processed them, their sustainability is most likely just another marketing layer. Then, secondly, is of course the P&L alignment. Sustainability often has a short-term cost. I look to see if ESG KPIs are integrated into the executive compensation and the annual budget. If the company is driving aggressive growth targets that clearly conflict with their sustainability claims, like prioritizing low-cost, high-pollution logistics, simply to hit, let's say, a quarterly margin, then the ESG commitment is secondary for sure. It's not strategic. So lastly, I'm going to draw your attention to the conversation around data versus narrative. Marketing focuses on stories, but board level focuses on data. I wouldn't look for the marketing brochure anywhere. I'm going to look for an independent audit of their environment footprint. In conclusion, Sunny, my takeaway is this: we must treat ESG as a risk management function, not a PR function. If we aren't willing to disclose the ugly parts of our footprint, we aren't truly sustainable. We're just waiting for the greenwashing to be exposed over here. I hope that answers it for you.
Absolutely, Ms. Chavi. And what I appreciate about that answer is that you are not speaking from a policy document, you are speaking from a production cycle. Most ESG conversations happen at the brand level, and you are telling us what it looks like 3 steps behind the logo, and that's where the real test is.
Thank you.
All right, so I have a certain segments of question now to ask you. Our audiences want to enlighten. So let me ask you the next one. You have managed global brands like Clarins and Dior in the Middle East and also built businesses in India. What are the most common governance or strategic blind spot companies run into when they try to scale between these two regions?
Right. So the biggest blind spot I see is the universal playbook fallacy, the assumption that a successful operating model in one market is a plug and play solution for the other. When brands scale between GCC and India, they often fail to realize that these aren't just two different geographies. They are two fundamentally different governance architectures. To make my point, I'll start with a fundamental disconnect. In the GCC, retail logic is built on stability and exclusivity. Governance here focuses on long-term partnership health, high-end real estate, and an extremely aware multinational customer. Conversely, Indian D2C logic is built on velocity and adaptation. Governance there demands agility in supply chains and a quick response to pricing and product mix, possibly daily. If a brand carries the GCC style rigidity into the Indian market, they fail to react, to local demand shifts and get crushed by operational overhead. Conversely, if they carry the Indian style chaos, if I may say so, into the GCC, they alienate an affluent, detail-oriented consumer base that expects perfection. Now, here is where I'd like to mention that equally critical is the view from the corridor. My dual market experience reveals two distinct realities that management teams constantly underestimate. Let's say the Omani nuance. India-first brands often underestimate the cultural custodianship in the GCC. On the other end of the spectrum, the Indian demand. GCC-trained operators often struggle with the sheer scale that's required of India. But beyond these points, the real imperative for the board is oversight over expansion. Before any board approves a corridor entry, we must move beyond market size reports. The governance question that should be asked is, does our current governance structure allow for a local first pivot, or is it trapped by our existing HQ's metrics? Operational agility is not just a management tactic. It's a board level asset. If the board insists on a single rigid KPI dashboard for both markets, they're setting the management to fail. To my mind, the overarching takeaway here is we don't just export the brand, we import the local intelligence required to support. Thank you.
Incredible, Ms. Chhavi, and that's apt, because what you have just described isn't theory, it's pattern recognition built over 2 decades in two very different markets. Great, what an insight. All right. So, Ms. Chhavi, tell me, in luxury and cosmetics, brand equity is everything, and it can be really fragile. So, can you share an example of a moment where commercial pressure came into conflict with brand integrity or ethical standards, and how you navigated that?
Yeah. So, as you've said, in the luxury and beauty sector, brand equity is the most valuable intangible asset a company owns, yet often it is the most fragile. I faced a defining moment of conflict really early on in my career that taught me that integrity isn't just a moral position, it is a commercial discipline. I'm going to reflect for a moment on the pressure, which is really short term versus the long term. So early on in my career, when I was managing a luxury portfolio brand, and we're not going to name the brand here, we were presented with a massive distribution opportunity through B doors. The commercial pressure was immense. We were trailing in our annual revenue targets, and this deal would have actually bridged the gap instantly. The easy decision of fix, and the one which the sales was actually pushing for, was to flood the market and sacrifice some brand ethics and hit our quarterly numbers. But it required placing a premium heritage brand in an environment that was deeply discount-driven. Now, the stakes were high because a brand that loses its exclusivity in the consumer's mind rarely ever gets it back. So that was the conflict that I was faced with. So it takes me to the decision that I had to take. The decision was, of course, standing. So I made the call to find the opportunity. The pushback from within my team was significant. They saw this immediate revenue loss as a failure. I held on to my position, but I explained it by presenting a cost-benefit analysis, not of the current quarter, but of the brand's lifetime value. What it did was it demonstrated that while we would hit our targets today, we would lose brand ethos and market positioning necessary for the next several years. What was the outcome? So we missed the specific quarterly target for sure, but the brand's prestige remained intact. And voila, within 2 quarters, we secured a far more strategic partnership with a retailer whose customer base actually matched our brand's DNA, ultimately driving higher margins and long-term brand equity that far exceeded the original short-term temptation. To sum up my position, so integrity is a board level discipline. This experience taught me early on that integrity is actually a commercial strategy, not just a value. If you don't put your brand's integrity during high pressure moments, you are effectively eroding the company's future for a short-term financial fix. I realize that this instinct, the ability to look past the immediate P&L to protect the long-term health of the organization, is the primary role of a non-executive director. When I sit in a boardroom, my role is not to stamp the easy commercial win. It is to be the voice in the room that asks, are we sacrificing our future for our current quarterly report? My 2 bits here.
That was incredibly insightful, and thank you for sharing that, Ms. Chhavi.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that brings us to the next segment, which is quick fire round. Short answers, gut instinct, no overthinking. Are you ready for it?
All right. Let's go for it.
All the best.
Thank you.
So here I shoot you with the first question. Brand storytelling or brand performance? Which one wins in 2026?
I'm not supposed to think. So performance gets you the first transaction. Storytelling builds the asset. So storytelling doesn't win 2026, it wins the decade.
Oh, great. Next one. The Indian consumer is ready for premium sustainable fashion at scale. Yes or no?
Yes, but only if quality and design speak louder than the sustainable label. That's still true.
Great. One word for the GCC beauty consumer?
Discerning. One
Right.
word.
D2C or physical retail? Where do brands really get built?
Okay. So DTC is where you test the hypothesis, but physical retail is where you actually build the monument. So how was the rapid fire?
That was lovely. But one more question still on for the rapid fire round. One thing every founder underestimates when they start a brand.
Customer retention.
All right. So that was fun. That was sharp. Okay. I loved every answer of yours. And I hope you enjoyed playing it too.
Loved it.
Okay. So the next segment is a little challenging and a little serious conversation. Let me ask you, in the last 2 years, we have watched several big consumer brands, Sephora pulling out of certain markets, Body Shop going into administration in the UK, Nykaa correcting hard after listing. Tell me, the consumer does not disappear, but the boardroom clearly missed something. So, what does a brand boardroom usually miss until it is too late?
Yeah, well, this is a high stakes discussion and really close to my heart. So I feel that boards often get trapped in the rearview mirror perspective, looking at the quarter's financial reports while the market has already moved on. I'm going to start with something here, which is the lagging indicator trap. The single biggest blind spot in the consumer boardrooms today is over-reliance on lagging financial indicators. Boards are, of course, masters of analyzing the P&L from the last 90 days or choose the tenure, but they're often blind to leading indicators of cultural or market shifts. It's rarely a data problem. The data is usually there in the customer feedback or shifting churn rates. To my mind, it's a courage problem. It takes courage to challenge a winning growth trajectory because of subtle soft signals that aren't yet showing in the balance sheet. By the time a market shift hits the quarterly results, the brand has already lost relevance. The board misses it because they're really measuring what happened, but not why it's changing. I'm going to now take the bait, Sunny, and talk about Sephora. Like this one's deeply personal. So if we look at Sephora's recent and not so recent structural shifts and exits from certain highly competitive markets, there's a message. Sephora is a global titan, but a boardroom blind spot often occurs when global players assume their domestic playbook can be stamped into every new geography without local first governance. So we had Sephora enter into Oman as early as 2006 or 7 and exit within a year and a half or so, and then correct and re-enter in 2021-ish. So clearly the headquarters missed something. What did the board see? What did they see at the time? That's my question. A world-class, possibly a world-class, retail experience, unparalleled brand partnerships, and a proven high-touch consulting model that dominated the West. But clearly they missed something. So what did they miss? They underestimated the rapid maturity of local agile competitors who understood the specific nuances of the regional consumer much faster. In many emerging markets, local players actually pivoted really quickly to local language. So whether it is Nykaa misjudging customer retention costs post IPO or Sephora assuming a Western luxury playbook can be if effortlessly, cloned into complex local markets, the root cause is the same. The boardroom was tracking past prestige, read data, instead of present customer friction. I'm going to conclude this discussion with a synthesizing point. So there's got to be a director level fix where governance is a radar. So to prevent this, I believe every consumer brand director should adopt a new quarterly ritual. Beyond the standard financial review, we need a customer pulse review, a deep dive into non-financial KPIs like net sentiment, customer acquisition, velocity versus retention rates, and third-party, ethical audit scores. But ultimately, I believe brand health is a fiduciary issue, not a marketing one. If the brand loses its equity, the company loses its long-term viability and shareholder value is destroyed. It is the board's duty to ensure that strategy is not just profitable today, but defensible tomorrow. So I'm going to leave this discussion with a thought for the boardroom. It proves that global brand equity does not equal local market immunity. And with that, I rest my case.
That's a sharp observation. And I think what you have just described is going to be uncomfortable for a few people listening because they are sitting on those exact boards right now. The fact that brand health is showing up as a fiduciary issue and not a marketing one is, I think, the shift the next decade is going to demand. Great. So before we wrap up, Ms. Chhavi, let me ask you, you are a valued member of Directors Institute, World Council of Directors. What made you to reach out to Directors Institute and what has that experience given you?
Yeah, good question. So reaching out to the Directors Institute was a strategic pivot for me. After 2.5 decades of being in the trenches, building brands from ground up, I realized that while I possessed deep operational intuition, I needed a formalized framework to translate that experience into the language of the boardroom. I chose the Directors Institute because it wasn't just about theory. It was about the rigors of independent oversight. So for me, it was about from doing to governing. What drew me to the Institute was the community of peers who had successfully made the transition from high-level management to board-level stewardship. A defining moment for me was a session on both strategy and crisis oversight. It was a revelation. I realized that governance isn't just about regulatory compliance, it's about navigating the unknowns that the C-suite is often too close to see. It changed my work because it taught me that my greatest value as a director is not my ability to solve a problem, but my ability to ask the right, uncomfortable questions before a problem reaches a critical stage. I've learned some lessons too through the lens of accountability. The Institute shifted my perspective on brand strategy entirely. Previously, I viewed sustainability and supply chain transparency as core components of a brand narrative. But through the Institute's lens, I now view them as fiduciary risks. One practical insight that I've applied is the governance first approach to vendor auditing. Instead of asking, is this sustainable? I now ask, is this audit process robust enough to withstand a shareholder inquiry? That shift from a marketing mindset to a governance mindset has been powerful. It reinforced the belief accountability is the bedrock long-term commercial success. Furthermore, the strategic language of leadership. The most profound value has been the cross-pollination of ideas, learning alongside leaders from finance, tech, manufacturing. It forced me to strip away industry-specific jargon and focus on universal principles of risk and strategy. The Directors Institute bridged the gap between operational history and my future as a board member. It provided the formal board-level voice that experience alone cannot always provide. It taught me that while experience and expertise is what gets you into the room, it's your strategic language, your focus on ethics, and your commitment to long-term stewardship that keeps you there. It's an invaluable platform, Sunny. I reiterate that transforms practitioners into directors. Thank you.
Great to hear that, Ms. Chhavi, and thank you for that. The fact that DI gave you the language for what you already knew, that's exactly what the Institute is meant to do. And that's a beautiful place to close this conversation. So, Ms. Chhavi, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your journey and insights with us today.
Thank you very much, Sunny, and thank you to Directors India as well. Thank you.
And to our audiences, there is something rare about a leader who has sat across from Dior and Clarins in one side and a fabric mill in India on the other, and can talk about both with the same seriousness. What stays with me from this conversation is the idea that brand is not decoration, it is governance. So, for everyone listening, whether you are building a brand, sitting on a board, or thinking about the next consumer wave, remember this. The next decade of consumer business will not be won on logos or ad spends. It will be won on geography, on sustainability, and on the discipline behind this story. So, with that food for thought, this has been FaceTime with Leaders, powered by Directors Institute, World Council of Directors. I'm your host, Sunny Pancholi, signing off for now. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay fashionable. Thank you so much.